Hello friends, welcome to Laws and Scriptures 360. So in today's video, we're going to discuss something entirely different from the Nigerian Tax Act. We're going to discuss a trending news that has made people ask a lot of questions and if it is practicable in Nigeria. And what are we talking about? The principle of breach of promise to marry. Is it applicable in Nigeria? Is it entertained by Nigerian courts? What rules applies to these principles? These and many more we're going to be discussing in this video with reference to the recent allegation by the popular actress Doris Ogala on the pastor or the minister of the gospel, Pastor Chris, where she accused him of breach of promise to marry and alleged that she has already consulted her lawyers to file necessary actions in court. Now, if you have not subscribed to this channel, this is an amazing opportunity for you to subscribe because we will be dishing out beautiful legal principles and enough knowledge to go round. Kindly subscribe and share and like, so that you would encourage us to continue. So I will start with giving us a background story of the allegations and the alleged facts behind the allegations of the actress Doris Ogala against Pastor Chris Okafor. Now, Doris Ogala went, she through her social media handles, and she alleged that she had been dating the pastor for quite a while, Pastor Chris Okafor, for quite a while, and he promised to marry her. Unfortunately, recently, Pastor Chris Okafor, she saw videos and pictures of Pastor Chris Okafor's new fiancée and dates and rumors of him getting married to her, and she expressed her displeasure. She was so sad in those videos and further informed her fans that she had engaged the services of her legal practitioner to file an action against Pastor Chris Okafor for breach of promise to marry, where she'll be asking for damages as a result of her losses from his breach of promise to marry her. Now, these are the facts of this particular case. Now, let us look at the principles of breach of promise to marry. Now, because the Nigerian Matrimonial Causes Act does not provide for breach of promise to marry as one of its matrimonial causes, the principles of the laws of contract in Nigeria will now be applicable for breach of promise to marry. These principles are offer, acceptance, intention to create legal relations, consideration. I think these are the four principles of laws of contract. Now, for someone who is approaching the courts or applying for breach of promise to marry, that person must prove a number of things. What are the things the person must prove? One of the things that the person must prove are, one, that there was an offer for marriage, and this offer must either be expressly made or impliedly made. There must be an existence of the defendant asking the plaintiff or the claimant here to marry him. The claimant must prove that one day the defendant asked her to marry him. This proof can be in form of maybe videos, text messages, WhatsApp messages. These are the ways the claimant can prove that the defendant at one point or the other asked her to marry him. Secondly, another thing the claimant must prove is that she accepted to marry him and she was willing to marry him at the time the offer was made. So if the claimant can prove that when the defendant asked her to marry him, that she accepted and she was willing to marry him. Now, in this instance, Doris Ogala must prove that she accepted Pastor Chris' offer to marry her, and she must also prove that Pastor Chris Okafor actually asked her to marry him. You see that these are the principles, but don't go away. We are coming back with more principles. Now, there must be mutuality and capacity to marry. What I mean is that both parties must be adults of marriageable ages at the time the offer and acceptance to marry was made, and at the time too that the offer and acceptance was made, that none of them was lawfully married to another person. In this instance, when Pastor Chris Okafor asked Doris Ogala to marry her, Pastor Chris must be single at the time. He mustn't be married to any other person. He must prove that. And Doris Ogala must also prove that at the time she was also single and not married to any other person. At the time the offer was made, there was no impediment as to any of the prohibited degrees in terms of either affinity or consanguinity. That means they were not married to anybody and they were not prohibited from marrying under the Nigerian laws at the time the offer was made. And then there must be consideration, which in most cases would be evidence of maybe an engagement ring, or something that evidenced their engagement, and not engagement because you assumed that he has promised you. Nothing about the promise should be based on assumption. It must be clearly made and clearly stated, and proof of it must be made to the court to avail you your damages under the breach of promise to marry. And then the person, that's the defendant here, that is Pastor Chris Ogala, must have breached his promise to Pastor Chris Okafor must have breached his promise to marry Doris Ogala, and Doris Ogala must prove that he breached it by either saying he married someone else and evidence of the marriage. All these things must be brought before the court to avail one of for damages, so that you'll be entitled to your claims for damages under breach of promise to marry. Now, from my analysis of what the courts will look at to actually grant applications for breach of promise to marry, do you think that Doris Ogala would be entitled to damages if she brings an application for breach of promise to marry under any of the Nigerian courts? Do you think she has enough proof that Pastor Chris Okafor actually breached his promise to marry her allegedly? I'd like to hear our thoughts on this. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned something today. Thank you very much for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.